friends, I have a substantial update for the tiny house. The framing of the floor is basically done. This is Kay's Tiny House Adventures, where I, Kay, am building my very own tiny house. I have zero build experience. That's my dog Chaco. And although I have no experience, I have drive and I have really amazing friends. It's taken many weeks. Doug was in Arkansas for a few weeks, so that meant that the rest of the A team really had to focus on wine duties while he was out. So I tried to do as much as I could while he was out, but it wasn't very much. But now that he's back, we've been in high gear and we've been just getting stuff done. So I have to time travel back to when we first started framing the floor so you can get the full story. Back in the beginning, the first thing I had to do was figure out my framing plans. I worked with the company Summit Tiny Homes out in Canada, and they did a lovely job with the blueprints, but the spec sheet that I gave them of the trailer I was buying wasn't perfect. The trailer is great, it's just that spec sheet was off, so that meant all of the measurements were off. And what was cool about the blueprints is they broke down like how much lumber to go buy, how many nails to get, screws, etc., and of like what sizes. So all of that math was done before, but because the trailer wasn't exactly like it, we had to refigure it out. So one of the reasons why I'm framing wood on top of the trailer I purchased is actually a trailer meant for tiny homes, and the idea is that it has these cross beams as part of the trailer so that the trailer itself could be the subfloor. But when I was working with Summit Tiny Homes on the design, we found it was much easier to run pipe through the floor if that was wood and not, steel. So we decided to add another lumber floor joist on top of that so we could do that more easily underneath the floor. We had Home Depot haul number 1, which was getting all of the initial lumber, the glue, the metal brackets. I think that was most of it. Putting together the frame was super easy. I was in charge of cutting the lumber down to size, and Doug was in charge of cutting out little notches in the frame because he came up with the brilliant idea that we could more easily run water and maybe even electrical in these notches so they're all perfectly aligned, and he used the table saw to cut them. I did one just to say I did it, but to be honest, the table saw is terrifying. The corner of the trailer had some welding that was butting against the frame, so we decided to just lightly shave off that corner so it was nice and flush. Day 1, we got all of the pieces cut, all of the holes for the water lines and maybe electrical all done, and we put it together so we would see how it would go. Day 2, Phil was back in the game, and we wanted to nail together all of the pieces that we had cut. Because this was the framing, we really wanted to make sure the boards were as straight as possible. So this is Doug and Phil aligning the board before nailing it in. Doug was in charge of using the scary nail gun. Now this nail gun, okay. Now, what's cool about Doug is that he has every tool imaginable, and many of those tools are older than I am. And so things like his nail gun, while it does the job, is terrifying because it's this huge, mean machine thing, whereas today's little cordless electric nail guns, like, I can use that easy. But this guy, I was like, nope, I would die. So Doug was in charge of that.
And then that's probably
some of the boards were pretty warped, so I had to use this gigantic wrench to help pull the board in the right direction as Doug was nailing them in. Also, look at my shirt as Doug hits the nail gun. The air pressure is so high, like you can visibly see it on my shirt. You know how our lumber joist crossed over on the side of the trailer, which meant that getting insulation in there, because I wanted to do the foam board insulation inside the trailer, was going to be really difficult to fit. It's pretty stiff stuff, so we decided to go pick up a sheet of foam board and fill those in before we attached the lumber frame to the metal frame. Doug used the trusty table saw to cut the foam board to length. This comes as one big, huge sheet that's 2 inches thick, so it was hard to use the miter saw, so the table saw was really perfect for this. Phil and I stuffed these into the trailer, and some of them were real snug, and like I said, this stuff is pretty stiff, so we had to push it in to make it work. And if you remember my awesome welding adventures, this piece is actually sticking out, so we had to measure and cut that out of the foam board so that it would fit nicely. Then the idea is to glue the lumber to the metal and then have a metal bracket that gets attached to both the lumber joist and the metal joist so that it tightens that gap and helps the lumber adhere to the metal. Now, the purpose of gluing is mostly to keep it solid and not squeaking and moving around. It's just making it one giant subfloor instead of a piece on a piece. And if you're worried about wind, etc., and the house flying off the trailer, we have tie down rods already installed on the trailer, and the walls will get tied to those tie downs. So don't worry, my house will not blow away. Unless it's like a tornado, then, I mean, yeah, I'm screwed. You can see a pile of the metal brackets on the bottom right. I had previously cut long pieces in half, and now Phil is making the holes. There were already holes in there, and he was just making them a little bit bigger. Doug and Phil proceeded to screw in the bottom half of the brackets into the metal part of the trailer so that when we glued it on, all we had to screw in was the top part that goes into the wood. And this was actually really funny to watch. I don't know why. Day 2 was a wrap, and here you can see how the metal brackets are screwed in at the bottom but not yet the top. When Doug was in Arkansas, I got to do things on my own. So, opening up the barn, ready to get some stuff done.
Today I am putting some foam board insulation into the trailer before we glue the frame to the trailer. I am on my own today, so usually we were using the table saw, but without supervision, I'm gonna use a trusty old-timey saw. So here we go. Okay, I am a sweaty mess because it is Texas, but I just FaceTimed Phil to teach me how to set up the drill press so I can make these holes a bit bigger to fit the nails and screws that we're going to use to put them in the trailer and the wood of the floor frame.
I then screwed these in. All that really needed them were the ones on the gooseneck. Debbie was kind enough to take pictures, and having seen how Phil and Doug did it, I decided to sit on the rafters instead. And then Doug came back, so we were able to continue working on the frame and actually glue it down. Of course, as we were figuring out where to put things, we realized that the shower floor needs to be slanted towards the drain, as all shower floors do. I want a linear drain, so we had to account for that. And we realized that we would have to build down into the subfloor to do that, which means that our joists needed to be cut out. Phil really wanted to just glue on the joists, and then we would cut the slant out of these joists while they were still attached to the trailer. I have it on video that he said he would chisel it out if needed.
I will chisel that by hand if we have to.
But in the end, taking them out was the winner. Then we glued the frame down. So Phil and I held up the frame while Doug sprayed the glue. And then once that area of the piece was done, we smashed it down, drilled in the top of the metal bracket into the wood piece, and then proceeded to do that across all of them. And that was an adventure, if I do say so myself. Once we had that down, we knew we could then drill the holes for all the drains. So figuring out where exactly was the toilet gonna be and where that drain should be, the bathroom sink, the bathroom shower, and the kitchen sink were all holes we needed to drill in. So we measured for that. The kitchen sink needs a 1.5 inch drain. The toilet needs 3 inches, the shower needs 2 inches, and then the bathroom sink is 1.25 inches. Just FYI, if you ever needed to know that, I memorized them all. Then on another day, while Preston was over at Doug and Debbie's, they were going to go cut down a bunch of cedar posts, but in the morning they decided to volunteer and help me use the table saw. This initially was going to be Doug training me on the table saw, But then it quickly became, this would be so much faster if Doug just cut them all and then Preston and I would stuff them in the trailer. It was way easier to have Doug use the table saw to cut them to width, and then I used the normal saw to cut them to length, and it was way better than what I had tried to do while Doug was out without the table saw.
Look at all that.
Preston is our insulation pusher fitter. And of course those awesome drain holes, we had to drill through the insulation as well. So I got to revisit underneath the trailer and tried to do that. And by afternoon, we had filled up everything except these little parts in the gooseneck where I was going to use some scraps that we had cut off and just try to jam it in there as best we could. Luckily that trailer is exactly 4 inches tall, so I was able to use 2 layers of that foam board stuff. And the idea is that I just wanted something pretty solid under there, because on top of that is gonna be the normal like mineral wool, rock wool batting kind of insulation, as well as the water lines. We also talked a lot about the shower. This has been like the puzzle of the year. That'll be really cool, and I'll definitely show y'all as we start building out that floor. But I think we'll finish the plumbing rough-in. So that is what I'm doing right now, and that's been really fun and interesting. And then once that plumbing rough-in is done, we can then put the rest of the insulation in the trailer and then cover it up with sheathing, and we'll have to build out that bathroom floor, which we're gonna be doing like a fiberglass situation. It's gonna be very interesting because there's a couple of things with it. Is that you want it waterproof, you want it light because it's on the trailer. What we're thinking now is we'll use fiberglass for the underneath as an initial layer, and then we'll build out the slope for the drain, and then fiberglass that to the floor as well, so it'll have that double layer backup for any potential leaks. And then on top of that will be tile, which I will attach with like a kind of like this silicone tile adhesive that is just a bit more flexible than traditional tile adhesive. So this bathroom is gonna be freaking awesome. I'm so excited for this bathroom. I have so many pins on my Pinterest board for it, but essentially it's going to be kind of a barrier-free shower. It's going to have a glass pane on one side, and then the shower's in the corner. And so everything's open. There's no shower doors or anything like that. Who's that? You ready to live in a tiny house? You want to live in a tiny house? Maybe? Maybe not? Okay. No, get me out of here. There will be a little sink with a little floating vanity, and then across from that will be the toilet. And on the same side is a pocket door, and that is how the bathroom will be. It feels small and big at the same time. It's really interesting when you think of like tiny house dimensions, but I'm really stoked for this bathroom. I think it's gonna be really cool. I still haven't picked out like the exact tiles and things that I want to use, but I have picked out the drain because we had to have that so we could measure where to put the drain to drill for the plumbing rough-in. There's, again, lots of hours of figuring it out, because while there are many tiny bathrooms with showers, it's always just, you know, to each their own of what they want to do and how they want to do it. Doug, who really wants to go sailing, is super into like how boats do stuff. And so for me, I was like, well, if it's good enough for a boat, it's good enough for a tiny house. I don't really care. So we'll see how it goes. It's definitely gonna be an adventure. Oh, another update is I got my windows in. So I'm going to have 8 windows total, 2 skylights in the ceiling, 1 big window on the end of the trailer where the kitchen sink is, another big window in the living room area next to the front door, another window behind the couch facing the door, and then 2 long windows up in the loft area, and then 1 smaller window will be like in the shower. I've received all of those. They all look good. I ordered those early because, you know, windows are notorious for taking a long time, but, you know, I don't even have walls yet to put windows in, so it doesn't seem to matter. But they're there for when I need them, and it's kind of nice because that was like the second highest expense after the trailer itself, so it was kind of nice to like get that out of the way. The big things are paid for. Now it'll just be like smaller Home Depot trips here and there, mini Home Depot trips actually here and there. I've gone to Home Depot so many times. Other than that, I think that's all I have for y'all today. Please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and then I will see y'all next time. All right, bye.